Hi, welcome to the show. Now, at the recent KitPlus Show in MediaCityUK, we met Kevin Leach, who was exhibiting for the first time as InQuality. Building on the success of their browser-based SIP interface, ipDTL, they've recently launched a range of low-cost hardware codecs that take advantage of the Opus audio codec and SIP.
Yeah, and pleased to say that Kevin joins us now. Welcome to this show, Kevin. So before we start, let's start by breaking down a few of the abbreviations. Maybe you can explain SIP, explain ipDTL to anyone watching who might not be clear on what it all means.
Yeah, so SIP is a telephony standard that's been around for some time now. You've probably heard of VoIP, voice over IP. SIP is probably the most common voice over IP protocol. The P stands for protocol, and the other words are session initiation protocol. So it's the signaling that's used to connect an internet phone call from, let's say, an office phone to another office phone, or in our world, from a broadcast audio codec to another broadcast audio codec.
So what makes your new devices special? What sets them apart from other existing IP codecs that are on the market, SIP or otherwise?
Well, probably the price is the first thing. Our devices are remarkably cheap, and that's because we actually build them in a modular fashion with off-the-shelf components. We have worked on our own cases, but it's ultimately a Raspberry Pi computer in there. And we've even released the firmware for free on the internet. So you can actually download our firmware and build your own Raspberry Pi-based SIP codec if you're that inclined. That's the cheapest way, but why do that when we can sell them to you for £149 for a very basic headless one such as this, and then they go up to our new XLR version, which I have one here, and as the name suggests, it's got XLR inputs and outputs on the back, and those are £400. So, the price is the main thing, and also the interoperability. Our codecs are designed, unlike some codecs, they're designed to be connected with other manufacturers' codecs. Sometimes with other manufacturers, you think they've designed them not to connect with other manufacturers, but I'll let you decide which ones I'm talking about.
So I guess that brings on nicely is, why as a company have you invested so heavily in SIP when many other codec manufacturers prefer their own proprietary signaling methods? Well,
it's a good question, and we've always been about interoperability. We first of all launched ipDTL 9-10 years ago now, and that was proprietary, even though it was using the Opus WebRTC standards, which were being built into the web browsers, Google Chrome, etc. at the time. It had its own signaling method. It wasn't using SIP, and therefore it wouldn't connect to anything else. And we quickly realized that to make it more useful, we'd want to be able to make phone calls and receive phone calls and to dial ISDN calls. So it was made backwards compatible with ISDN. And therefore, to do all of that, the best way to do that was to adopt a standard. SIP was the obvious standard to choose. And maybe I'm being unfair to some codec manufacturers, because most audio codec manufacturers do support SIP in some shape or form, but it's not always at the forefront of their design when they're building their products. So we wanted to put something out there which was designed to connect with everything. So like I say, phones, ISDNs, and other SIP hardware, including off-the-shelf. I mentioned office phones. You can connect from standard VoIP phones through to our services and vice versa. And likewise, you can connect between our web browser system, ipDTL, and our SIP codec. So it's a whole ecosystem of ours, which also connects to a wider ecosystem in the wider world.
So you've shifted your focus towards hardware, SIP-based hardware. Does this mean you're turning your back on WebRTC and browser-based applications that you were already offering?
No, there are now many WebRTC browser-based applications on the market, which is great. It does mean that it looks like it's here to stay, which is good for us. But we've made our unique selling point the SIP interoperability, and now you can think of ipDTL now more as a browser-based SIP interface than just another WebRTC audio point-to-point system. Therefore, no, we see these. We see our new XLR SIP codecs and USB SIP codecs as just part of that ecosystem. So, for instance, you can have somebody using the browser application at one end, and you can have that call being received on one of the hardware codecs at the other end, or vice versa, or any crazy combination of those things. It's worth mentioning ipDTL can receive up to 6 remote connections at any one time, so you could have 6 different SIP codecs connected through to the web browser on a computer, for instance.
So people may be wondering, Kevin, why they should or need to invest in this type of technology. I mean, where's the return on investment for this?
I think, for a start, as I mentioned, the investment's fairly low compared to spending, over £1,000 on an audio codec, for instance. These are far more cost effective. So, for instance, we've seen a lot of radio stations send these to their presenters and regular contributors in their homes, especially with the pandemic in the last 18 months, in the way that they wouldn't have been able to do with more expensive codecs. So there's that, and therefore the scalability of them, the flexibility, because like I say, in this transitional period, some people are still using ISDN, some people are trying other things, and gradually most broadcasters, radio broadcasters, are moving over to using SIP. Then this gives you that flexibility of being able to actually connect to the older systems and to the newer internet-based systems, all from the one unit. And I suppose thinking about your audience, who many of which are working on the more television and film, video side of things, these things come in really useful for event production, where in the past you'd have used a TBU, a telephone balance unit, for a four-way comm circuit, for instance. These things make a real neat little comm circuit to connect between, let's say, an OB truck and your base, where previously you might have, I don't know, lashed up a mobile phone or whatever it is that people have been doing recently.
And does it, I mean, I kind of want to introduce a slightly random question now. In that environment, is latency an issue?
Not much, no. I mean, it's interesting that we are currently using... It's interesting that we are currently using WebRTC for the connection between you and I on vMix, which you're using. It's the same kind of technology, and we're able to have a conversation here without really talking over each other. The latency of all of our services is pretty much the same. They're designed to be low latency. Opus, the audio codec of choice for us, is a low latency codec. It was designed for two-way communication across the internet. So no, you're talking, depending of course on distance and various factors, you're talking well under 500 milliseconds all up. Yeah.
And what can we expect to come out next from the In-Quality R&D lab, Kevin?
Good question. I'll come back to you on that. We've definitely settled down with our range of products and services for now. Right now, we're working on a little tweak to ipDTL and its sister product Hybrip. Hybrip is another one of those crazy acronyms. It's actually a combination of the word hybrid for phone hybrid, like a TBU, and IP, so Hybrip. We're working on a little update for ipDTL and Hybrip, just to make it a bit more intuitive, and it's those things which you never get around to improving, such as the credit card processing and how the subscriptions all tie up. We're doing a bit of work on those things. So the boring answer is kind of housekeeping right now. But now that we've got this firm product range of the USB SIP codecs and the XLR SIP codecs. And by the way, this is the touchscreen version of the USB that you can pop a USB mic in the side. We've got that product line nice and solid now with these nice new cases, which feel much more robust than the earlier versions that we rushed to market last year. So we're kind of just settling down with those and hopefully just tweaking them to make sure that everything's as solid and reliable as it can be.
Yeah, looks good. Efficient scaling of remote production, really. There, I think for that's the way to look at it. So, thank you very much, Kevin. It was good to see the products in the flesh at the recent show in Manchester, which was great. And if you'd like to find out more, then do visit the In-Quality website at inquality.com. Thanks to Mediaproxy for their support of KitPlus TV, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.